happy?
Yeah, good.
Just the chat, mate.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll probably keep this bit in because I like the pre-ramble.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Like I said, it's not like this isn't as awkward as some when we have to fake the introduction.
No.
So
Full disclosure.
Yeah. But for everyone else, Matt Stephenson, Matt or Matthew, which one do you prefer? Matt. So Matt Stephenson. This is ripped off your LinkedIn.
Go on.
So you're a senior technology leader and you specialise in helping businesses and business leaders unlock their potential by shaping strategic clarity and operational effectiveness.
Gosh, sounds good that, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Did I write that, I wonder?
Be copying that?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, that's me. Been doing it for a long time. Love technology. But I love talking to people, you know, that's why I make a big play there about helping people unlock things, because, you know, technology changes rapidly, but people don't, you know. So that's why I've sort of majored in that area.
This is going to get deep, folks, right?
Oh.
So this is, strap yourselves in for this. So I've got a bit of a tradition of picking out LinkedIn posts that pique my interest and dig a bit deeper into them. So this was quite a long one, but I've trimmed it down.
Yeah, go on.
So 53, not out. Last year, I had head and neck cancer. It was the roughest 9 months of my life. Major surgery, chemo, and radiotherapy meant that life felt pretty grim for most of the second half of 2023 and into 2024. Yeah. So why am I telling you this? Well, as a 53-year-old middle-aged bloke, seeing loads of chat online about ageism still being alive and well in 2024, my recent experience has given me time to reflect on the subject of longevity, why you should stop thinking of someone in their 50s as being past it and focus instead on the tremendous experience our age group can bring to your table. After all, the only way you get 30 years experience is to experience 30 years.
I did, yes, I wrote that.
What triggered that?
Well, I mean, that experience of the last couple of years with cancer has been a real eye-opener for me, you know. I've been working for 30 years by then, and probably was in a little bit of a rut work-wise. Not in a depressing kind of way, but just, you know, get up, do the job, enjoy the job, you know, do a good job and that sort of thing. But the very real prospect of not being around is very sobering. And so I've got a young family, and I thought, well, I need to focus on what it is I need to be doing for them. And I realised I was watching all of my friends retire in their 50s and really kind of, you know, that was their goal. The goal is to retire. And I was thinking, well, I don't know whether I want to retire, because actually I really enjoy what I do, you know?
Yeah.
And my kids are young enough that I can't really afford to retire. Not anytime soon anyway, you know. 7 to 13 is the age range of mine, because I had them late in life.
Yeah.
And which is why I've started doing more, you know, it's when I reached out to you to give me a hand with some of the social media marketing stuff that I've started to pick up on, and agreeing to do this sort of thing, which is a little bit out of my comfort zone. Yeah. You know, I've decided to just start to try and do more things aligned to the things I enjoy in work, because it's all about providing for that young family who, you know, frankly, I nearly wasn't around for. So it's given me a new lease of life, really, in terms of I wake up every morning and I'm thankful, you know. You know, it sounds could get too deep, couldn't it? But it's a real sobering thing, a real eye opener to realise that life's short. And the whole ageism thing, I see lots of people, you know, and it shouldn't be about age. It's about, you know, experience and maturity and that sort of thing. And I know some quite young people who are incredibly mature and successful and, you know, fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But the best teams actually are made up of a blend, aren't they? You know, I've seen people, it's these polarising debates I just don't get. You know, I've seen some people saying younger people have got no experience and therefore they're not to be listened to. And I've got younger people saying, you know, you lot are all old farts and we shouldn't be listening to you either. The best teams I've worked with are the ones where I still learn stuff from that younger generation, because they've grown up with some of the stuff that I've had to learn. Yeah. And I do, you know, think that I've still got some stuff to impart to them, because actually, although technology's changed a lot over the years and it changes rapidly, there's not that many new concepts come along. So, I've been around the block and I don't often come across a problem that I haven't seen in one form or another at some point. So that's the whole thing about don't write off people who are over 50, because the only way to get 30 years experience is to experience 30 years. And if you haven't got 30 years experience, the only way to get the benefit of it is to hire somebody like me who has got 30 years,
Yeah. It's a topic that I think many people... The reality is we're two white blokes talking about potentially could stray into how hard life is. But I think if one takes that away from everything you've just said, they've totally missed the point. Yeah. It's not saying my life's been so hard. I'm a 50-year-old bloke with it's not like you're not recognizing the position you're in.
I mean, my life hasn't been hard at all. That's the thing.
Yeah, but I think people take these sound bites, and it's more often than not the people who are spouting off about being inclusive and fairness. They're the most they're not very inclusive.
It can be a bit like that. Yeah.
And when you call them out, it's like, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah. Well, actually, we talked about it, Jack, previously. One of the hurdles I've had to overcome with this new desire to put myself out there a little bit in terms of LinkedIn content and this sort of thing. I said to you, my biggest hurdle to overcome is my fear of offending people.
Yeah.
Because it's very easily done these days.
Then you put like an AI picture and you got a bit of pushback.
I did.
Do you want to explain? I don't want to.
Yeah, I did a series of posts which were just chapters out of a book that I've written, and I thought, well, I've heard that LinkedIn posts do better with a picture.
Yeah.
So I was using ChatGPT to create some imagery. And I settled on this style of sort of a 1960s comic book style, because I wanted a bit of a theme, a continuity. And I was just giving it prompts, and it was coming up with images, and I was looking at them, and I thought, it was a fairly cursory glance. Yeah, that looks okay, that looks okay, that looks okay. And I had one on there which was about, I can't remember what it was about now. It might have been about, I don't know, working as a team or something. And the image it came up with was a couple of women sat at a desk and a couple of men standing around, and they were all looking very amicable and like they were working together well as a team. And but one of the gentlemen had his hand on the shoulder of one of the ladies, but she was like looking up and smiling, and he was looking down and all of that. And I got a message on LinkedIn, and it was a really nice message from somebody back in my history in my network, and who just said they didn't think the image was appropriate. And I mean, I never want to offend anybody. So I said, okay, well, look, I'm going to, I can't just remove the image without removing the whole post. And I was getting a bit of engagement. So I asked the audience, I thought I'll use it as an opportunity to actually have that debate, Anyway, I didn't get a lot of engagement in the question. The only response I did get was from a lady who said she wasn't offended at all. And I realized then that offense, even offense is a very personal thing and a nuanced thing.
Yeah.
So we do have to be aware of not deliberately going out to offend people, but we shouldn't be frightened of also saying what we say if it's well-intentioned and doesn't have malice in it.
Yeah.
So it's difficult though, because, again, I don't want to labour how old I am, but 30 years ago it was a very different world in the workplace, People getting strippers at their desks for their birthday and stuff, I mean, you just wouldn't get it anymore. And quite right, actually. Some things are best consigned to history, but
far too expensive.
But it's not that long ago. It's not that long ago though,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, anyway, that's gone down a tangent, hasn't it?
Yeah. But I think it's, even now, I'm like, both of us, I feel like we're on a unicycle across a tightrope with a load of sharks beneath it.
A little bit,
but it's not, but I think the intent is never to, like, I think you can get a pretty good gauge on you're not going out to offend anyone.
No, far from it, actually.
And neither am I, but sometimes I am, but it depends on who. But but
that's the thing, isn't it? You see, it is a very personal thing, because I mean, I look at your content, I really enjoy your content, but sometimes it is quite near the edge.
Yeah.
And it isn't a style that I would replicate, because that's not my natural style,
Yeah.
But I think people have got to be authentic.
Yeah.
And if you're authentic and well-intentioned, and if your intention is to offend, then you'll probably succeed. But
I think you've got to know when you've gone too far as well. In the scheme of LinkedIn, maybe it's gone over the LinkedIn line, but I've never been banned.
No.
and I've never had anyone. I've never been banned. That doesn't mean I've offended anyone, but my principles loosely are: I'll never go after individuals. I'll go after the people who I think I can handle it. So as a business, I sometimes will prod fun at the big four.
Yeah.
But if they're worried about me, they've got
they're not worried about anybody.
No, they can handle it. I have done things in conferences like put signs up in the toilet with QR codes saying like, don't piss away your agile transformation budget. I've done that at some of the bigger conferences, but I had a conversation. I'm going to like a 1-day conference in March, and someone said, are you going to do anything there? And I said, no, because it's a startup conference. It's 1 day.
Yeah.
And the people who are running it are just trying to do something a bit different.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do it there because that would be horrible. That would be making it about me, not what they're trying to do. So I think you've got to pick your enemies.
Yeah, I mean, the big four, people talk about them like they're evil. I mean, they're not.
No,
I know some fabulous people who work there and have worked in those sorts of consultancies. But when I started my business, it was very much to be an antidote to that, because the thing about, and it's a bit of a cliche, but you always hear about big four send the A team in to win the deal, and then they send the graduates in to deliver the plan. Yeah. There is a bit of that goes on, but not always. As I say, I've worked with some fabulous teams from the likes of PwC and Accenture and other places.
Same.
But you do pay a premium for the name. Nobody ever got fired for using one of those agencies, really. I mean, somebody will probably comment now that they got fired for using one of those agencies. But my whole ethos is about providing as much experience as their best people, but at half the price. It depends what you want, doesn't it? If you want to buy into the whole kind of security and team of a big four, well, fill your boots.
Yeah. But, to turn this back around on you for a sec. So where would you say your skill set now lies, and how did you get there? Yeah. I've put in brackets here. I think I've heard you say once, people change less often than tech.
Yeah. So how did I get here? Well, my core skill set now, I think, is about getting the best out of people. The more senior you get, the less you actually do. The more you depend on your teams to deliver stuff for you. And that was probably the biggest psychological hurdle I had to overcome when I moved into leadership roles. Because I started life as a software developer in this fine city, actually, in Royal Insurance, as it was back in 1993, and just less than a mile from here, actually. I spent 15 years there on what was at the time considered to be one of the best graduate IT training programs in the country. Gave me fantastic experience across a whole range of IT, or IT as it was then. I mean, it has changed a bit. I was a software developer for 7 or 8 years, and I moved into software architecture and design. And then we talk about the big four, but Royal Insurance then outsourced its software development functions to Accenture. But I stayed with Royal in their retained team, effectively what was called a business partner role in those days, keeping Accenture honest, making sure they were doing the things we needed them to do. And that was the start of a shift away from being a practitioner and more into kind of leadership and advisory and that sort of thing. And then from there, I went into further architecture roles elsewhere. Brands like Money Supermarket, THG. I went to, I did tech strategy director for Manchester Airports Group for a few years.
Okay, yeah.
And then I moved into automotive. My first IT director role was with a business called Cox Automotive, who possibly one of the largest companies in the world that not many people have heard of, because it's it's an industry name, really. It's very, very well known in automotive, but not outside. And the reason when I look back, I was probably only a mediocre developer. I'm quite comfortable with that, because back then when I was doing it, people weren't that bothered about standards and security and all that sort of thing. So being a bit of a hacker was all right, Yeah. But technology does change more often than people change, and so getting good at looking after people, I don't have to learn new things quite as often as if I was staying in technology. I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit lazy like that, but you look at these developers now who are constantly having to keep up to date with the latest thing, and luckily the core principles around software development haven't really changed all that much in 30 years. Yeah. So I still know enough about it to be able to sniff out the bullshit,
Yeah.
But I haven't written a line of code in anger for more than 20 years, Yeah. So people, it's all about people for me, getting the best out of people by enabling them.
Have you had to evolve as time? I think it probably refers to the tangent that we went down at the start of this, but as you've had to learn to deal with different people in these leadership positions, if you have had to evolve, how have you had to do it?
Yeah, so I've had to. It's very easy when you first start to do management roles. The people use the term micromanagement, and I hate micromanagement. I mean, the more senior you get, and the more you've got responsibility for, the more comfortable you have to get with not knowing what's going on everywhere. And that's a real evolution, I think. I see a lot of people who step out of management and into leadership, and they find it really hard to leave their teams alone to get on with stuff. So you've really got to have a mindset shift to move into leadership, I think. It's about knowing what, people talk about keeping your finger on the pulse, and I have this saying where I say not every vein is an artery, and you've got to know which ones to keep your finger on. He said, holding up his thumb. But you've got to know which ones are strategically valuable, which ones are likely to go wrong, which ones are particularly difficult, time sensitive, costly if you get them wrong. Those are the ones, and you stay close to those. The biggest teams I've had, I've had 150 people. I can't possibly know what 150 people are doing every day. If I tried, I would fail, and I'd fail to do some of the things I should be doing. And so you have to sort of make sure you build a team around you, which is this statement about the more senior you get, the less you actually do, and the more you do it through your teams.
So you've bought a couple of books with you today. One of them is called The 100-Day Plan Toolkit for Technology Leaders to Hit the Ground Running. And it's about going into an organization as a leader or stepping up in your current organization. Why did you write that, and what's it about? Could you break it down?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
obviously we'll link it in the comments.
Yeah, I love writing, and this was one of the things I did to try and distill some of the things I do every time I go somewhere new. Because I just thought it's nice to have it written down, and I have had other people find some value from it, which is very gratifying.
Nice business card as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. It's a posh business card. I never expect to retire off the proceeds, but handing somebody that instead of a little bit of card that they'll lose is a nice thing to do. So what that is, it's quite often if people go to a new role, whether it's a promotion within their organisation or to a new business, the first thing they'll get asked to do is a 100-day plan. So this is my attempt to write down how I go about that. And it's a 100-day plan, and it basically breaks down into a number of sections. It starts at day -10 or day minus whatever you can afford beforehand. But the important thing is to be prepared. So it talks a little bit about what to do there. It's about researching the company, researching the problems they might have, looking at their competition, looking at their products and all that, stuff you'd expect really, stuff you do to prepare for an interview actually. But it gives a bit of structure to that. Then it's got a section about day one, because I think it's really important to take control of day one. The old cliche, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Well, that's your day one. And in the past, I've been in new roles where day one was taken from me by other people wanting to show me around and introduce me to the people they think it's important to see and all of that. And wherever possible, I resist doing that on day one in a new role. And I mean literally day one. And I'll spend day one with my teams, meet a small number of key stakeholders or whatever, but I definitely won't, if I can at all avoid it, subscribe to the idea of being trotted around, meeting all and sundry who I'll never speak to again in the entirety
like
of
a
my
show
time.
dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come on, Matt.
Repeating the same reason why I'm here to every one of them. It's just
being paraded around the office. I've got this image now.
And then after take control of day one, it then talks about established credibility. I always say that in the most senior technology role in a business, a lot of what you're going to ask people to try and do for you is going to be quite difficult, and it's going to require a level of trust. So I talk about, it's not my saying, I wish it was, I don't know whose it was, but it's definitely not mine. But this idea of identifying the burning imperative is something I focus quite heavily on. And the burning imperative can be a different thing wherever you go. It could be a project that's been failing for ages. It could be, I don't know, a process which continually lets the business down or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Find something, but the key thing is it's got to be something you can fix. You can fix it quickly and it'll make a meaningful difference. And you go and you identify that early and go at that. But then doing other things to establish credibility. So you'd have a track in the plan about what am I going to do to establish credibility. And then when you ask them to do harder things, then they've got some trust. And it's not just your credential you're relying on your credibility as well.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your credibility starts off on there when you're doing an interview or a consultation or someone brings you in, the people who want a problem solved, because that's what gets you in the door. And then as soon as you start with a team, your credit is zero again.
Yeah.
And you have to try and...
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I mean, I always say that credentials are the past, credibility is the now. And you can go to modify your bit there, I'd say it's your credentials that get you in the door.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you do start with zero credibility.
Why should they trust that this outsourced person who's
I
walking around with a notebook in their hand?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anybody who writes a CV, if they write a bad CV, well, I mean, more fool them, But the CV will get you a seat at the table, then it's all about what you say and do. And so establishing that credibility is really important. And then you get into the meat of the plan then, and I break it into these phases that I call assess inwards and assess outwards. So assessing inwards is looking at your team, looking at your products, looking at your business, looking at everything internally to what you can directly influence. Working out where the pinch points are, you do things like skills matrices and gap analyses and that sort of thing, and SWOT analysis, all of those analyses that you can do to get a picture of where you are and what you've got and what you're working with. Assess outwards, which would run in parallel. You're looking at your competitors, the market, the industry, adjacent industries sometimes, if you're there, particularly if you're there in a product development or innovative role, quite often you can bring stuff from other industries that can translate. E-commerce has got a lot to offer in terms of, I work in automotive at the minute and people in automotive are selling cars online now, and that was unheard of a decade ago. Certainly, maybe even 5 years ago, people weren't really doing that. But a lot of e-commerce thinking has come into that. Even the concept of try before you buy, you can get a car delivered to your house. One of the big barriers to people buying cars online was, well, I want to test drive it. So I will deliver it to your house. And if you don't like it within 7 days, you can just send it back. It's a huge innovation. But it was needed before people would buy a car online because it's such an important big purchase.
Yeah.
And then after the assessing inwards and outwards, I've then got the bit about sort of planning for the future. And obviously you want to be there longer than 100 days. So that's when you start to work out what you can do longer term. And then you just get into that. And so it breaks down into those fairly simple things. And the book's got a load of templates in it that I often use. And I've had some great feedback. I haven't sold thousands of copies, but I've sold a few, and a few people have reached out to me and said they found it really useful. And it is a toolkit, so you pick and choose out of it. You don't have to do it all rigidly.
Hello folks, sorry to interrupt this video, but if you have got this far, it would really help if you did subscribe to the channel. Because it's face-to-face, it makes convincing people a lot easier to travel up all the way to Liverpool to record in this lovely studio. So, like I said, please subscribe and thanks for watching. But I think that's a good demonstration of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, isn't it? You haven't done it for the external. It's nice to get the external gratification, but you did it because you like writing.
Yeah.
And if it helps one person, then that's
brilliant.
That's fine.
Yeah, brilliant.
There's a kid's book there.
The kids' book was a bit of a vanity project, really. I've got 3 young kids, as I say, between 7 and 13 now. And when my eldest, who's 13, he must have been 5 or 6, I wrote a story, and it's the little cloud that poured, and it had no pictures, but he liked it and used to fall asleep to it. It was really nice. And I thought, oh, well, what a nice thing to have for him. And he's got his 2 siblings as well. And then I did some rough sketches for it because I'm a bit of a doodler, and he liked the drawings. He wishes I'd published it with those drawings in. I mean, they were garbage, but anyway, that's the unconditional love of a child, hey? And then COVID struck. And I had this story, and it was just a Word document, just in text, a little rhyming thing, because my kids love Julia Donaldson books. You know, I don't know if you know Julia Donaldson, but
I've heard of her.
The Gruffalo and Stickman and all of those sorts of things. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of books, and my kids love them all, and they all rhyme. So it's a rhyming one, and got into COVID, and we were all locked down, and the kids were at home, and I thought, this is a horrible situation. I mean, it was horrific, wasn't it?
It feels like...
I feel like a long time. It's 5 years ago this year. Yeah. 5 years ago.
I'm 35 this year, and I remember celebrating my 30th like it was yesterday.
In lockdown.
In lockdown.
Gosh.
And it just to your point earlier on, without going back into it, everything goes so quick, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I mean, 5 years ago, I can't believe it. But I just decided that I wanted to do something creative and positive with that time. I mean, I was still working at home.
Yeah.
And actually working, I mean, we could spend an hour talking about working from home. It's hard work, actually. These people who say working from home is easy and it's a DOS and it's a perk. It's actually harder to strike a work-life balance working at home, I think, if you don't work at it. But anyway, nevertheless.
You said something key there. You said working at home, instead of working from home. Is that intentional or?
It wasn't intentional, no. Okay. No, but working from anywhere where there's nobody watching over your shoulder is... I think it's harder to strike a work-life balance working at or from home, because the boundaries between the start of the work and end of the workday blur.
Yeah, I've just interrupted you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a segue, but so I decided I want to do something creative and positive, and there's a guy who's quite well known on LinkedIn, actually, called Dave Clark, who is a pal of mine. I've known him for over a decade. Anyway, his daughter is a very talented illustrator, Sophie Clark. I'll give her a shout out. But she was looking to build a little bit of a portfolio. So I commissioned some illustrations from her for the story. And I sent it off to a few traditional publishers and got rejected very, very quickly. Because it's not what they were looking for. I didn't take it personally. I like the story. My kids like it. That's all I was doing it for. Yeah. And then I stumbled across, the Kindle direct publishing, print on demand thing, and I realised I could just print 3 copies and give them to my kids. But then I left it published, and I mentioned it to a few people, and I started selling a few. And
didn't you go to some festival?
Oh, I went to a book festival in Knutsford, where I live, and I had a table there with the books out, and sold a few copies there over the counter. But
I don't think it should be. It's an achievement. It's just
I mean, I'm proud of it. My kids love it.
Yeah.
And actually, some of my friends who've got copies say their kids ask for it often, at bedtime and stuff, which is very pleasing.
Well, I'll put it in the comments, in the description.
Yeah, but then the other books, that was very much I want to write down some stuff that I've learned over the years. The other one there, the 35 Thoughts one. I mean, that's 35 very short chapters. None of them's longer than 2 pages, deliberately, because they're conversation starters.
Yeah.
You talk about a business card. That was the first book. And anybody who reads that will get a little bit of an insight into my style and how I operate and what my values are, actually. Because there's a lot of stuff in there about what I believe to be the right thing to do in work. It talks about
strippers at lunchtime.
Strippers at lunchtime, and the only thing that stands up to scrutiny is the truth. Pay people what they're worth before they resign. Stuff like that, really, where it came about actually because I was working. I was doing some work with a startup in scale up, I suppose, in Manchester. And one of the lads who was there said, "Oh, you've got a saying for everything, because I do like a good saying,
Yeah.
In fact, I think the first sentence of the book says, "I like a good saying, me. I always have, And then every chapter is sort of one of my sayings, and then why I say it, And I'm working on a follow up, very creatively entitled 35 More Thoughts for New and Aspiring Leaders. So I just love writing. I just really enjoy the process and getting stuff out of my head, and and if other people get some value from it as well, that's great. Thanks for the plug.
That's all right. That's what it's for. In terms of delivery, and this theme of being around the block, where do organisations, from your experience, go wrong when it comes to delivery?
Well, I mean, they go wrong in lots of places, but quite a common thing that I see, I think, is they think that it's important. Not every business. I mean, my current clients actually don't make this mistake. They're brilliant. They really invest in the right things, which is why I enjoy working with them. But I have worked with people who think the most important thing to do in a delivery team, for example, hire more developers. Just hire more developers. I've been places where delivery wasn't optimal, and they just wanted more developers because they wanted to get more work done. And they raised eyebrows when I suggested investing in the management team first. Oh, well, we need to see more capacity. I said, well, you don't really. I said, because if you have more capacity at the minute, it'll just be more capacity being badly managed and being poorly deployed and working inefficiently. Let's get the most out of what we've got first. And to do that, you need them being better managed. And I talk about this concept. And again, it's not my concept. Again, and I wish I knew who it was. But have you heard of this idea of a mile wide and a foot deep, or a foot wide and a mile deep? Yeah. If you're a software developer or an architect or whatever, you've got knowledge that's probably a foot wide and a mile deep. So you're a deep technical practitioner, a specialist, if you like.
It's like T-shaped people, isn't it?
It's
cone-shaped people.
It's exactly that, I think. Yeah, exactly that. So as a practitioner, a specialist, you've got deep knowledge about something. When you get into leadership, you have to have knowledge that's a mile wide and a foot deep. So you need to know a bit about everything. But you can't succeed in isolation being that sort of person. So I am very comfortable with the fact that all of my success comes from me getting a team of people to do the right things. So collectively, if they're all a mile wide, a foot wide and a mile deep, collectively they're a mile wide and a mile deep. I mean, that's a very long-winded way of saying you have to have a bunch of specialists to cover the area, and a generalist to manage them or lead them is the best team. So I always do that when I go somewhere, and businesses sometimes resist, but I'm almost always right in that regard. Get the right team of people managing the other teams, and then hire the capacity once you're happy the ones you've got are optimal. So that's probably the first lesson I often try to bring to the table when I go in somewhere new where it's not optimal.
Yeah. I pre-warned you about this.
Go on.
So again, there's this whole theme of being around the block. Agile is an industry today. I would like to know your thoughts. So context, 2001, I was 11 years old, right? And that's when the Agile Manifesto was brought to life by those 17 individuals who got on the beers in the ski resort. In my mind, that's not true. I don't know, it might be true. But they went to that ski resort. 4 values, 12 principles for the Manifesto for Agile software development. But as I've met, people of my age and younger, it's not something we would have lived and breathed at the time.
Yeah.
Because we were still in school.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on where it came from?
Yeah.
What was your experience like back then?
Yeah.
And how has it evolved over the years? I think that's an important timeline for those who are new to this stuff and don't have that context from back then.
Well, I was very lucky, really. So in 1998...
France World Cup, France 98?
Yes, it was, yeah. 1998. I think it was 98. A colleague of mine at the time, when I was at Royal Insurance, he went to a conference called OT 98, Object Technology 98. I think that was the year. And Ken Beck was there as a keynote, so the author of Extreme Programming. I don't think he published a book until 2001, actually. So it was, I think he was probably working on the book. Interestingly, I exchanged a couple of messages with him recently on LinkedIn, and because he's still quite active and he's still quite a compelling voice, Anyway, a colleague of mine went and saw him speak at a conference and came back to us at Royal Insurance, and he and I led the charge on introducing XP into our team. And we had a bit of success with it over the course of 6 or 8 months. I mean, nowadays you wouldn't think 6 or 8 months is long enough to have a bit of success, but when you're starting from no agility at all, you can have quite a lot of success quite quickly.
Yeah. So extreme programming.
Extreme programming. 12 principles, 40-hour week. It became sustainable pace. Pair programming is one of the 12. Anyway. And we really enjoyed that way of working, The following year, I then went to the same conference, and there was a lot of stuff on the conference program around extreme programming. People weren't really talking Scrum a lot in those days, I don't think. Forget the timeline for Scrum now. And then I was involved with that conference for a few years then. And he and I, my colleague Stephen and I, we presented an extreme programming conference session the following year in 2000 and again in 2001. And then I was conference chair for a couple of years, 2003, 2004 or something like that. And I was very lucky during that time with that conference that we had Martin Fowler as a keynote one year. We had Alistair Coburn one year. Ivar Jakobsen, who's not to do with Agile particularly, but he was he UML use cases or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, but anyway, in the
it was these big names. So I mean, 3 of those were signatories on the manifesto. And
do you think they knew what they were creating? Because you've interacted with these people.
I don't know whether they would have expected it to have the longevity it has, and for people still to be talking about the manifesto. I mean, people roll their eyes at me when I talk about the manifesto because it's so old now.
Yeah.
And they go, here he goes off on one again about the olden days, you know. But I do enjoy looking back at the website, and I'm sort of quite pleased that they haven't refreshed the website since they published it in 2001, because it's one of these websites, it's Times New Roman font, and it's got a background image, which is a greyed out, faded image of them standing around a whiteboard in the ski resort in Switzerland, you know. And it's a real snapshot in time.
Yeah.
But the reason I mention it often is I see all these debates about if you are or you aren't agile, and if you're not doing this, you're not agile, and if you are doing that, you are agile. And I just cut through all of that with my team. I say, look, as far as I'm concerned, and not everybody agrees with me, and I'd be interested in your views, Jack, actually. I always say, if you deliver value regularly, if you ask for feedback often, and if you're willing to change what you're doing in the light of feedback, you can call yourself agile, regardless of what you're doing, actually, regardless of the methods and the practices and the events and the ceremonies and all of that. You know, Scrum helps, XP helps, all of that they all help because they're geared up towards that way of working. But I've worked in waterfall projects who delivered stuff iteratively into a stable test environment and sought feedback. I would argue that they are more agile than somebody who's following every Scrum ceremony but not really achieving those benefits.
Yeah.
So the early experience for me of agile was there was quite a lot of people who were quite evangelical about it, and you had to do it all or you weren't doing it at all, and if you weren't doing it, you were evil and all of that sort of thing. And then I think it went through a phase then where I think agile became a bit of a swear word for me.
Is this, I'm looking at the notes, this was going into like the 2010s.
Yeah, into the sort of 2010s. And it's because it became overused, the word agile. You know, people would use the word agile to mean lacking in discipline and changing their minds every 2 minutes arbitrarily. You know, people say, we need to be more agile than that. Don't use the word agile, you know, just because it's not. But I think it did the movement no good at all. And I think more recently, though, it's reached a level of maturity now, though, I think. And I know there's lots of people calling themselves agile coaches, but I think the people who've got some real agile experience under their belt talk an awful lot of sense. And those are the people I'm still learning from, actually, because I'm very conscious of the fact that as a practitioner, my agile experience is very out of date. And the teams I'm working with at the minute, I'm learning from them every day because we've got some really skilled agile practitioners.
And do they just do it because it's more they've just grown up with developing software in that way?
I think so. Yeah, you might be right, actually. I think it's mainstream now, isn't it? I mean, you do still get some people talking about it like it's a new thing. But for the most part, some people have never worked any other way and wouldn't even think there is another way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are still some things where I think waterfall is valuable. I mean, when I was at the airport and they were building an air traffic control tower and we were putting software in there, you definitely want to do big design up front on that.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, I think it's reached a level of maturity now. Although I do find some of the still polarizing debates in agile quite bemusing.
Well, yeah, I think you wrote on here,
The story point one.
Yeah. So, for example, I'm fascinated by the story points are evil narrative because some of my teams have had tremendous success using them and have delivered consistently for their businesses with them.
Yeah.
But I also get that they're not for everyone and people prefer issue counted throughput. Preferring one doesn't mean the other is evil. Just pick what works for you.
Well, you've said it all there. I mean, it's true. There is polarizing debates, you know, they've existed my whole career. When I was a kid, it was whether Betamax or VHS was the better format for your videotapes, you know. Microsoft Windows versus IBM OS2. Java versus Smalltalk. What else? Custard creams versus bourbons. You know, I mean, polarizing debates my whole life. Custard creams, by the way.
Yeah. Android versus iPhone.
Android versus iPhone. I mean, there's always PlayStation, Xbox. You could list thousands of them. And I see people now debating story points and velocity versus other things, as if story points and velocity are actually evil, and how could we have ever thought they were a good thing? The reality is, with relative complexity estimating done well, it's still a valuable and useful way of working, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't disparage somebody who didn't want to do it and wanted to use, you know, issue count and throughput, for example, because that's also perfectly reasonable.
It's just as long as the intent behind them is understood, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, really, it's largely about forecasting, isn't it, to be honest? I talked about Agile being evangelical in the early days. I did actually work with people who refused to give an end date for a body of work because they were agile. I'm like, well, that just doesn't work in business. Well, but we don't know. It's agile. And I'm thinking, well, that's one of the reasons it started to get a bad name, actually, in my opinion. Yeah. Business is still business, and particularly if you're in a B2B world like I am, you're delivering to another business. They don't care that you're agile or not. They just want the finished piece of software at the end, and sometimes there's no value in any of it for them until you've done all or most of it.
Yeah.
So delivering to them iteratively is pointless. You can't do it. They need all of it. So I just think you have to be able to forecast an end date to a body of work. I always use language like, we'll deliver it on or around, there or thereabouts.
Yeah, as well, that's the forecast, not a commitment.
It's a forecast. It's a forecast, not a commitment. And you modify your commitment. The beauty of the forecasting using, regardless of which technique you use to do the forecast, and the beauty of it is you get an early view of whether you're on track or not. So I can use language like, if we maintain our current rate of work, and if our backlog of work is as we currently believe it to be, we will finish on or around Easter next year, or whatever. And then I can also say, our work rate is not fast enough for us to deliver on or around Easter next year. And then that gives companies the opportunity to do something, invest in more capacity, which some of my clients have done in the past, reduce the scope, which some of my clients have done in the past.
Yeah.
Because the date's important, or flex the date because the scope's the more important factor. And with traditional estimating around effort and time, it's just fundamentally flawed. And you generally only learn you're going to miss it too late to do anything about it.
Yeah.
To segue, but I'd get this off my chest. Estimating by effort, to do that properly, you've got to know three things that you typically don't know. You need to know everything you're going to do at a task level, because if you're estimating time and effort, it has to be against the actual work. If you don't know all the work, you're going to lean really heavily on contingency, and then it's just a guess. You've got to know who's going to do it, because what you might take a day to do, I might take 5 days to do because of my level of skill and expertise.
It'd probably be the other way around, but yeah.
And probably not. But I mentioned I was a mediocre developer. And the third thing is you've got to know when you're going to do it, because every team I've ever worked with has got faster as they've moved through a body of work because they've gelled as a team. Yeah. You don't know any of those things at the start. I mean, with my current client, we didn't even have most of the team because that was part of the program of work. The transformation was to hire the team as well. So there's no way I could know who was going to do it and when and what level of skill they'd have. So you don't know any of those things. So you come up with a number and then you ladle contingency into it, in which case what you've got for your forecast is just a guess. Yeah. So that's why I don't like it.
There's a line in extreme programming, or a couple of lines, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but it's along the lines of, if you're the one, so I think it was, if you're a leader within a team or something, or it might have just been if you're a team member, your job is not to manage expectations. The job is to communicate honest information for other people to manage their own expectations. But to do that, you need that information.
You do.
And not bullshit people.
Yeah.
Because people, it's not like, I've heard it so many times, I need to manage the business's expectations. And I'm like, well, they're not babies. And you're not a babysitter. Just go and give them the information. If they react to it, their reaction is
You can manage the reaction to their expectations, but
it's up to them to manage their own sort of reaction as well, isn't it? Based on the facts that you're giving them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people let themselves down sometimes, because they rely too much on the forecast and they think that's a commitment.
Yeah.
When it's not.
Agile leans very heavily into communication. It's right at the heart of Agile, isn't it? And I think if you're talking regularly with your stakeholders, there's no expectation management required, actually, because they're just part of the conversation.
Part of the team. That's in next B, isn't it? Have a customer as part of the team.
Maybe not on-site customer, they called it. No. I mean, not many businesses can necessarily support that, because it's taking somebody out of a day job. But of course, we very quickly started talking about proxies for the customer. And typically, it would be a business analyst. And nowadays, it'd probably be a product owner.
Yeah.
But you touch on, I mean, I don't want to plug the books too much.
Plug away.
But the green book there, the first chapter is the only thing that stands up to scrutiny is the truth.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about, we've all been there. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of it at times where you get told something as a reason for why something's happening. And you go, that just doesn't smell right, that.
Yeah.
So you scratch away at it. And very quickly, you scratch away at the veneer and you uncover the fact that it's just bullshit. And all credibility's gone for that leader then. So I always try to take the stance that I'll tell the truth as I see it at any given time if I'm asked a direct question. Even if the truth is, I can't talk about that right now. Some people say, but that just unsettles people. I say, well, maybe, but not as much as you might think, because they're all grown up.
Yeah.
And then the counter to that, though, is I have another saying, which is, I'll tell the truth always, but reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah.
So, I do know some people who would tell you nothing until it was absolutely baked in stone because they didn't want to appear indecisive or tell you something that might not happen. But then typically you hear about it too late because it's already done and it's being done to you now.
Yeah.
So, not everybody agrees with me on those two things, but they've stood me in reasonably good stead. More often than not, it's a decent tactic.
Yeah. We talked about plugin before, but what's next? Like, what's the business is called? Step Thinking.
Step Thinking, yeah.
What's all that about? What are your current plans for 2025?
Yeah, well, as you know, because you've given me some help, Jack, I've been trying to just up my game a little bit in terms of my LinkedIn content. I'm trying to build an audience, really. I've got a couple of great clients at the moment who are happy for me to help them for quite a bit, a bit longer through this year. I'd be delighted to carry on doing that. I've got my side projects. This whole podcast thing is fascinating for me, and I'm enjoying the process, and it's making me think about video. You gave me a little nudge just before Christmas to dip my toe in the water of video, and I did it with a little silent movie.
It was good, that. Yeah,
I enjoyed the process.
Actually.
The Love Actually thing, which I quite enjoyed that process. As did my kids, thought it was hilarious. Me standing on the doorstep with my cards. So I'm going to maybe dip it a bit more into a bit of video. It was part of this wake up call I got last year, really, about. In my head, I'm still 25 years old, you see, but I'm not. I'm 54 years old this year. And I keep reminding myself I have got quite a lot of experience. So I'm going to try and find different vehicles. So just getting that experience out there. My core services are around leadership and advisory and strategy and that sort of thing. But I can only be talking to one person about those at a time, really. Yeah. So the books are a way of getting that out there more, and video seems to be quite a good way of doing it. And because I love technology, I love the process of learning how to do all that as well. So that's for me this year as well. And then just hopefully keep picking up work. But because I enjoy it,
Where can people reach out if you're willing for them to?
Yeah, well, they can find me on LinkedIn. they can find me at stepthinking.com, and they'll find my phone number there as well. And so just reach out to me by email or on LinkedIn. I love the chat. I wish I could get paid for doing business development meetings because I really enjoy them.
Yeah.
Because I like hearing about people's problems and seeing if I can solve them. And like I say, I've seen most things. That might sound a bit pompous, that I don't mean it to. Just I have seen a lot of stuff, and there's not that many new problems really. The technology might be new that's causing the problems, but the problems are often rooted in lots of the same things. So, yeah.
Is there anything that I should have asked, which I haven't, that you've got on your mind?
No, I don't think so. No, we're talking about plugs. I know I've talked about those books, but if you don't
hold them.
I was going to. There we go. So, have a look at those. Great.
There we go in that camera there.
Thank you.
This is 35 thoughts for new and aspiring leaders.
Yeah,
this one.
I should have had a shorter title for that book. Really.
100-day plan to get the technology leaders to hit the ground running. And this is probably the one that's most on my level.
Yeah.
The little cloud that poured. A story about selfless acts.
There we go. Thanks, Jack. I wouldn't mind doing another plug if you really don't mind at all.
Go for it.
We talked about my cancer battle of the last couple of years.
Oh yeah.
I'm in good health now.
Yeah.
And it's entirely down to the people at the NHS in Aintree's Cancer Centre, the surgeon team there. Clatterbridge Cancer Centre, just around the corner, where I had my chemo and radiotherapy for 6 very grueling weeks last in the summer 2023 now. My God, how fast that time's gone. And then the Macmillan nurses, so they are angels, right? So, I get quite emotional talking about it, actually. But what I would say is, if you've got any spare cash this year and you don't know what to do with it, give it to them, because they absolutely deserve it. And that's the biggest plug I want to give today, really, is to them.
Just if you want me to link, is there
off the top of my head, there are donate pages for all of those things.
We'll do it.
I'll let you know what they are.
I'll put it in there.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today without them like 18 months ago. Okay. So thanks for the opportunity to plug them.
Thanks for being so open.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
And if you like this video, somewhere on the screen now, there'll be probably up there. There'll be you might like this video, which you probably might if you got this far, and if you haven't, you're not welcome anyway. Yeah. So cheers, Matt.
Nice one, Jack. Thank you.